if I can, I think the obvious question here or observation is going to have to be, is it because the beaches are open in Virginia Beach and the Hampton Roads, or is it deeper in throughout all of Hampton Roads? And are there correlations to the protests that went on in Eastern and Southeastern Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, I just can't tell for sure because the numbers don't help to explain that, and we have arguments about that. Some people are arguing about the reopening. Some people are talking about the protests. You know, we've seen it in terms of Hampton Roads. Newport News and Norfolk have had extensive numbers go up, but so has Chesapeake and Virginia Beach. You know, on you know, far more closer to the beach. So. By and large, I don't know exactly if if that's the reason, one of those two features, or, you know, I sometimes think that in some ways the virus hadn't even really hit Hampton Roads. Their numbers were so low by comparison, not only to Nova, but to the RVA area, is that it was almost as if they had been almost quasi-immune. And now all of a sudden the virus has gone down there and it's starting to hit in ways that we saw in Richmond and particularly in Nova 2 and 3 months ago. And I don't exactly know the reason. I wish I could tell you, but obviously we have a different situation today than we had as recently as 2 to 3 weeks ago.
That's very interesting because a lot of things happened in the month of June in this country. You know, obviously schools were already off, but you had the beaches opening up, you had the protests, you had people moving around a bit more freely, thinking this thing was put away. And I think a lot of people took comfort in the fact that our treatments of COVID were getting better. People weren't dying as often. They weren't as hospitalized as much. Where are we now in Virginia on hospitalization rates and most importantly, dying? I mean, how deadly is this in Virginia?
The hospitalizations are interesting. That you know, the best data for hospitalizations come from the Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association, and they started a dashboard in April 8th. I think about that time we probably had about 800 or 900 people in hospitals with COVID-19. It went up to a high of, I think, Chris, 1625. Then it went down very considerably. It was going down, went down to like 750, with our test positivity rate that had been as high as 15, went down to 5.8%. And over the last week and a half, the number of people in hospitals have actually gone up. And those hospitals, we now have, I think today was about 1,130. So sort of a midway between the low point and the high point in terms of the people in hospitals. In terms of the death rate, and that's been, that's a challenge because that's often a lagging indicator. People are in the hospital for weeks beforehand. But we've had a pretty consistently, you know, people keep dying. I think today we finally passed 2,000 people, unfortunately, who are now dead in Virginia from what people believe are COVID-19.
Let me stop you right there. Are we differentiating between dying from or dying with?
I think this is basically what people think are dying, you know, what they're saying are dying with and from. I mean, I think there's not a great differentiation there.
Right.
So for example, you had early on, we had all of those folks dying in the nursing homes. That was the big Achilles heel in Virginia. The first couple of months was the long-term care facilities, which while we were focusing on PPE in hospitals, we hadn't focused enough on what was happening in the long-term care facilities. And I think people could make a case in that you know, that there's some mix of dying from and with. But by and large, these are what they think called probable COVID deaths, is how they determine it. And where we stand in the nation is that in terms of our death rate, Virginia's kind of in the midpoint of the nation there. We're by no means near as high as some of the other states in terms of death rates that, you know, got hit early, the Michigans, the New Yorks, the New Jerseys, and the like. And so we're kind of at a midpoint in the nation there. And our case numbers are starting to approximate where we stand in the nation in terms of population, that we're reflecting that. So our performance has not been, very unusual, you might say, compared to what you might expect, that we've been sort of in the midpoint in terms of death rates, and at the same time, we're approximately where we are in population in terms of the number of cases.
So